Captain Lyra Thane stood before the massive communications array, her blue skin pale with exhaustion. The holographic display showed the same terrible truth it had displayed for weeks. Another Zephyrian colony had gone dark. Kepler 438b, home to 12 million souls, now appeared as nothing more than a dead rock on their sensors. "Captain, we're receiving the final transmission from the Harmony Station," reported Lieutenant Kess, his voice barely above a whisper. The young officer's hands shook as he worked the controls. They're asking us to remember them." Lyra closed her eyes. The Harmony Station had been a research facility dedicated to peaceful exploration. Scientists, teachers, children learning about the wonders of space. Now they were about to become another meal for the Devourers. The Devourers had appeared from the dark space between galaxies 6 months ago. No one knew where they came from or why they consumed everything in their path. They weren't interested in resources or territory like normal species. They simply ate entire worlds, breaking them down to basic atoms and incorporating the matter into their ever-growing fleet of bioships. "Send our warning to the inner colonies again," Lyra ordered. "Tell them to evacuate everything they can." "Ma'am, we've already sent the warning 17 times. The evacuation ships are already overloaded." Kess looked up from his station, his eyes filled with the same hopelessness that had infected their entire crew. Lyra walked to the main viewport and stared out at the stars. Somewhere out there, advanced civilizations continued their daily lives while the Zephyrian collective died slowly. She had sent pleas to every major power in the known galaxy. The responses had been disappointing. The ethereal Dominion had sent a polite message expressing their concern, but explaining that they could not risk exposure to an unknown threat. Their energy-based life forms were apparently too delicate to engage in warfare with biological enemies. The crystalline hegemony had been more direct. They had calculated the economic cost of intervention and determined that saving the Zephyrians would not provide sufficient return on investment. They had offered to purchase any Zephyrian refugees as workers, but only if they could prove their usefulness. The Galactic Trade Federation had simply ignored the messages entirely. Even the warlike Saurian Empire, which normally jumped at any chance to fight, had declined. Their scouts had observed the Devourers in action and decided that discretion was the better part of valor. "Captain, incoming transmission from the Senate," Lieutenant Kess announced. The hologram of Senator Vex appeared before Lyra. The elderly Zephyrian's normally silver hair had turned completely white in the past few months. His 3 eyes, usually bright with intelligence, now seemed dim with defeat. "Captain Thane, I have unfortunate news. The emergency session has concluded. The Senate has voted to surrender." Lyra felt her heart skip a beat. "Senator, with respect, you cannot surrender to the Devourers. They don't take prisoners. They don't negotiate. They only consume." "We are aware of this fact, Captain. But we have run out of options. Our fleets are destroyed. Our colonies are falling one by one. Perhaps if we stop resisting, they will kill us quickly rather than slowly. Senator, please, give us more time. Our long-range communications team believes they can boost our transmission power. We might be able to reach species we've never contacted before." Senator Vex was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice was tired. "Very well, Captain. You have 72 hours. If you cannot find help by then, we will broadcast our surrender." The hologram faded, leaving Lyra alone with her thoughts. She turned to her communications officer. "Lieutenant Kess, contact Dr. Yara in the science department. Tell her we need that transmission boost now." Dr. Yara arrived on the bridge an hour later, carrying a data pad and looking excited despite the dire circumstances. The middle-aged scientist had been working on experimental communications technology for years. "Captain, I believe we can increase our transmission range by nearly 300%. The power requirements will drain our entire energy grid, but we should be able to reach star systems we've never contacted before." "Do it," Lyra said without hesitation. The next 6 hours were a blur of activity. Dr. Yara and her team worked frantically to modify the communications array, while Lyra crafted what might be their final message to the galaxy. She had to make it perfect. The message needed to convey their desperate situation while also explaining what the Devourers represented. a threat to all life in the galaxy. "Array is ready, Captain," Dr. Yara reported. "We've identified 17 star systems within our new range that show signs of intelligent life. Some of the signals are quite primitive, but intelligence is intelligence." Lyra nodded and activated the transmission. Her image was broadcast across space, carrying her words to civilizations unknown. "To any species capable of receiving this message, I am Captain Lyra Thane of the Zephyrian Collective. Our civilization is dying. An enemy called the Devourers is consuming our worlds. They are not interested in conquest or resources. They exist only to consume all matter and energy they encounter. We have pleaded with every known civilization for help, but we have been abandoned. If you can hear this message, please know that if we fall, the Devourers will continue to spread. They will not stop until they have consumed everything in this galaxy. We are not asking you to save us. We are warning you that we may be the first, but we will not be the last. This is our final transmission." The message repeated on all frequencies. As the communications array sent it toward the 17 star systems, most would take months or years to reach their destinations. But maybe, just maybe, someone would hear it in time. "Transmission complete, Captain," Lieutenant Kess reported. "Total power drain has left us with emergency power only." Lyra stared at the tactical display showing the advancing Devourer fleet. They would reach the core worlds in less than 72 hours. The Senate would surrender and the Zephyrian Collective would become just another forgotten civilization. But then something unexpected happened. Lieutenant Kess looked up from his station with surprise. "Captain, we're receiving a response. It's from one of the primitive systems. The third planet of a system they call Sol." "Put it through," Lyra ordered. The voice that came through the speakers was speaking a language the universal translator had never encountered before. But somehow the meaning was clear. "Zephyrian vessel, this is Deep Space Communications Array Earth. We have received your transmission and are analyzing the threat data. Stand by for response from United Earth Defense Initiative. Message ends." Dr. Yara looked at her instruments with confusion. "Captain, the transmission signatures suggest their technology is centuries behind ours. How did they respond so quickly?" Lyra didn't know, but for the first time in months, she felt something she had almost forgotten: hope. Maybe, just maybe, someone in the galaxy still believed that some things were worth fighting for. Outside the viewport, the stars remained silent, but somewhere in the darkness, Earth was preparing to answer their call. Dr. Elena Vasquez had been working the night shift at the Deep Space Communications Array when the universe changed forever. The massive radio telescopes nestled in the Chilean mountains had picked up something impossible: a coherent signal from beyond the known reach of human technology. "Run the translation protocol again," Elena ordered her assistant, Dr. James Park. "There has to be an error in the computer." James shook his head, his eyes wide behind his glasses. "I've run it 12 times, Elena. The math is solid. This is a distress call from an alien civilization, and they're saying something is eating their planets." Elena stared at the data scrolling across her screen. The signal had traveled over 400 light-years to reach Earth. The beings calling themselves Zephyrians had somehow detected Earth's primitive radio emissions and were begging for help against something called the Devourers. "James, encrypt everything. Send a priority alert to the International Space Defense Council. Then call Director Morrison and tell her to get here immediately." Within 6 hours, the small communications facility in Chile had become the most important place on Earth. Director Sarah Morrison of the Global Defense Initiative arrived via military transport, followed by representatives from every major world government. "Dr. Vasquez, please explain the situation," Director Morrison said, as she entered the facility's main control room. Elena activated the holographic display, showing the translated Zephyrian message along with their analysis. "Ma'am, we've confirmed the signal is genuine. The Zephyrians are a spacefaring civilization under attack by something they call the Devourers. According to their transmission, the Devourers consume entire planets and have already destroyed most of the Zephyrian colonies. And they're asking us for help?" asked General Chen Wei of the Chinese Space Defense Force. "Not exactly, sir. They're warning us. They believe that if their civilization falls, the Devourers will continue spreading across the galaxy until they reach Earth. The room fell silent as the implications sank in. Admiral Rachel Stevens of the United States Space Command was the first to speak. How long do we have? Based on their data, the Zephyrian core worlds will fall within days. After that, Elena paused, running calculations in her head. If the Devourers maintain their current expansion rate, they could reach Earth in 20 to 30 years. Director Morrison activated her secure communication device. I'm calling an emergency session of the World Defense Council. Every nation on Earth needs to hear this. The next 48 hours were the most intense in human history. Government, leaders, military commanders, and scientists from around the world gathered in emergency sessions. The public was told only that an important astronomical discovery required immediate government attention. But behind closed doors, humanity was making the most important decision in its history. The choice is simple, General Marcus Kane addressed the assembled world leaders via secure video conference. We can wait 30 years and hope our defenses will be ready when the Devourers arrive, or we can take the fight to them now while they're still dealing with the Zephyrians. President Maria Santos of Brazil raised her hand. General Kane, with respect, how can we possibly fight an enemy that has defeated a civilization centuries ahead of us technologically? Kane's smile was cold. Madam President, the Zephyrians might have better technology, but they're not better at war. Humans have been perfecting the art of killing each other for thousands of years. We've never had a real enemy before, just each other. Now we finally have something worth fighting. Admiral Stevens activated a classified holographic display. Ladies and gentlemen, I'm about to show you projects that have been running in secret for decades. When the Cold War ended, we didn't stop building weapons. We just started building them in space. The display showed images that took the breath away from everyone in the room. Massive shipyards hidden on the dark side of the moon. Weapons platforms disguised as asteroid mining operations. Fleets of warships that officially didn't exist. How many ships? Asked President Chen of the European Federation. 237 combat vessels currently operational, Admiral Stevens replied. Another 150 under construction. We can have a full battle fleet ready to launch within 60 days. Director Morrison stepped forward. The question isn't whether we can build a fleet. The question is whether we should. We're talking about traveling hundreds of light years to fight a war against an enemy we've never seen. General Kane activated another display, showing footage from Earth's recent conflicts. Ma'am, humans don't need a reason to fight. We just need an enemy. And for the first time in our history, we have an enemy that deserves everything we can give them. The vote was closer than expected, but it passed. Humanity would go to war. The next morning, Dr. Vasquez sent a response to the Zephyrian distress call. The message was simple and direct. Zephyrian Collective, this is Earth. Help is coming. Transmission ends. 400 light years away, Captain Lyra Thane stared at the translated response with disbelief. The primitive civilization from the Sol system was sending help. She didn't know whether to laugh or cry. Back on Earth, the greatest mobilization in human history had begun. Factories that had been building civilian goods were converted overnight to military production. Scientists were pulled from universities and research institutions to work on weapons projects. The entire planet became a single war machine with one purpose: to build a fleet capable of crossing the galaxy and destroying an enemy that had never faced anything like humanity. Admiral Kane was given command of the expedition. His first order was simple. I want every weapon we've ever dreamed of building. I want ships that can fight in deep space for years without support. And I want soldiers trained to board enemy vessels and kill everything inside them. We're not going to the Zephyrian system to save them. We're going there to show the galaxy what happens when you threaten Earth. In shipyards hidden throughout the solar system, the fleet began to take shape. These were not exploration vessels or research ships. They were weapons built by a species that had spent millennia learning how to kill efficiently and effectively. The lead ship, named Retribution, was over 2 kilometers long and mounted weapons capable of cracking small moons. Its hull was designed to ram through enemy vessels while its crew survived inside heavily armored compartments. As the fleet neared completion, Dr. Vasquez received one final transmission from the Zephyrians. It was brief and filled with static, but the message was clear. The core worlds were under attack. "Admiral Kane," she reported over the secure channel, "we may be too late to save the Zephyrians, but we might still be in time to make the Devourers regret coming to this galaxy." Kane's response was exactly what she expected from humanity's new military leader. "Dr. Vasquez, we're not going there to save anyone. We're going there to teach the universe a lesson it will never forget." The launch of humanity's first interstellar war fleet was witnessed by no one except the crews themselves. From hidden bases scattered throughout the solar system, 237 warships emerged from concealment and began their journey toward the Zephyrian system. Admiral Marcus Kane stood on the bridge of the flagship Retribution, watching as the last of his fleet moved into formation. Each ship represented decades of secret military development. These were not the peaceful exploration vessels that humanity showed to the world. These were weapons designed by a species that understood war better than any other form of communication. "All ships report ready for jump." "Admiral," reported Captain Lisa Rodriguez, Kane's second-in-command. The veteran officer had served in 3 different Earth conflicts and had personally requested assignment to the fleet. "Begin acceleration to jump speed," Kane ordered. "Signal all ships when we are now at war." The journey to Zephyrian space would take 2 months using humanity's most advanced, faster-than-light drives. Unlike other species that used their travel time for rest and preparation, the human fleet spent every moment of the journey becoming more dangerous. War games were conducted daily between different ship groups. Human tactics had been developed through centuries of conflict against other humans, the most innovative and ruthless opponents imaginable. Now those tactics were being adapted for use against an alien enemy. Commander Sarah Park of the destroyer Vengeance was running her crew through boarding scenarios when the fleet intelligence officer made a disturbing discovery. "Admiral Kane, we've been monitoring Zephyrian communications," reported Lieutenant Colonel James Mason over the fleet communication system. "The good news is we're still receiving signals, which means they're still fighting. The bad news is that we've decoded their tactical reports." Kane listened as Mason explained what human intelligence had learned about the Devourers. The enemy was a hive mind species that operated massive biological ships. They didn't fight for territory or resources. They simply consumed everything they encountered and used the matter to build more ships and soldiers. "What's their weakness?" Kane asked. "That's the problem, sir. According to Zephyrian reports, they don't seem to have one. They don't fear death because individuals don't matter to the hive mind. They don't need supply lines because they eat everything they encounter. They don't get tired or make mistakes because they're all controlled by a single intelligence." Kane smiled, and everyone on the bridge felt a chill. It was not a pleasant smile. "Colonel Mason, the Zephyrians have been fighting a defensive war. They've been trying to protect their civilians and save their cities. They've been fighting with honor and following the rules of civilized warfare." Kane paused and activated the fleet-wide communication system. "All ships, this is Admiral Kane. I want every crew member to understand something. We are not going to fight with honor. We are not going to follow rules. We are going to war against an enemy that threatens Earth, and we are going to teach them why humans are the most dangerous species in the galaxy." Over the following weeks, the human fleet prepared for warfare unlike anything the galaxy had ever seen. Unlike other species that fought to defeat their enemies, humans fought to destroy them completely. Every weapon system was designed to cause maximum damage and maximum terror. The ship Nightmare carried experimental weapons that could disrupt the neural connections of biological entities. The destroyer mounted kinetic weapons that could punch through the core of a planet. The Terror carried boarding parties equipped with weapons designed specifically to cause fear and panic in hive mind species. Dr. Elizabeth Thompson, the fleet's leading expert on psychological warfare, had developed tactics specifically for fighting the Devourers. "The hive mind is their strength, but it's also their weakness," she explained to Kane. "If we can cause enough trauma to their shared consciousness, we can make them afraid to engage us." "How do we traumatize something that doesn't fear death?" Kane asked. "We make them fear something worse than death. We make them fear us." 6 weeks into the journey, the fleet received an updated transmission from the Zephyrian system. The core worlds were under direct attack. but they were still fighting. More importantly, they had managed to establish communication with the human fleet. Captain Lyra Thane's image appeared on the main screen of the Retribution. The Zephyrian officer looked exhausted and desperate, but she maintained her military bearing. Admiral Kane, I am Captain Thane of the Zephyrian Defense Corps. We are honored by your response to our distress call, but I must warn you, the Devourers are unlike any enemy you have ever faced. They have consumed over 90% of our civilization. Our most advanced weapons have barely slowed them down. Kane stepped forward so that his image would be clearly visible to the Zephyrian captain. Captain Thane, we appreciate the warning, but you should know that humans have never faced an enemy we couldn't defeat. We're not coming to your system to save you. We're coming to show the Devourers what happens when they threaten Earth. Thane stared at the human admiral for a long moment. Something in Kane's eyes made her shiver despite the warmth of her ship's bridge. Admiral, with respect, what makes you think you can succeed where we have failed? Kane's smile returned cold and predatory. Captain, your people fight to protect. Humans fight to kill. When we arrive in your system, you're going to see the difference. The transmission ended, leaving Thane staring at a blank screen. She had asked for help from across the galaxy, and Earth had sent her monsters. She just hoped they were the right kind of monsters. As the human fleet approached Zephyrian space, long-range sensors detected massive biological ships moving between the outer planets. The Devourers had arrived in overwhelming numbers, just as the intelligence reports had indicated. All ships, battle stations, Kane ordered. Signal the fleet. We are about to make first contact with an alien species. Let's make sure they remember it. The first engagement occurred at the edge of the Zephyrian system, where a small group of Devourer scouts was stripping an asteroid field for resources. The human ships approached under stealth, using technology adapted from submarine warfare. Target acquired, reported the weapons officer aboard the Retribution. Devourer bioship, approximately 2 kilometers in length. Multiple smaller vessels in escort formation. All ships fire at will, Kane ordered. No survivors. What followed was not a battle. It was an execution. The Devourer scouts, expecting another encounter with the defensive-minded Zephyrians, found themselves facing an enemy that had spent centuries perfecting the art of surprise attacks and overwhelming firepower. The human weapons tore through the biological ships like paper, but more importantly, the human ships broadcast the death screams of the Devourer crews on all frequencies, ensuring that the hive mind would experience every moment of terror and pain. Within minutes, the entire Devourer scout force was destroyed, but Kane wasn't finished. Signal all ships, he ordered. Take debris samples from the enemy vessels. I want our science teams to analyze their biology. When we meet the main fleet, I want to know exactly how to make them suffer. As the human fleet continued toward the inner system, they left behind a field of destroyed Devourer ships and a clear message broadcast on all frequencies. This is Admiral Kane of the Earth Defense Fleet. Any Devourer forces in this system have 36 hours to retreat or be destroyed. This system is now under Earth protection. Deep in the hive mind of the Devourers, something new began to grow, an emotion they had never experienced before. For the first time in their existence, the Devourers began to feel afraid. Captain Lyra Thane stood on the bridge of her damaged ship, watching something that should have been impossible. The human fleet had arrived in Zephyrian space 12 hours ago, and they were systematically destroying the Devourer invasion force that had seemed unstoppable just days before. Captain, the humans are requesting permission to come aboard, reported Lieutenant Kess. Their Admiral Kane wants to establish joint command. Lyra nodded, though she wasn't sure if having humans aboard her ship was a good idea. The brief communications she'd had with the Earth fleet had left her deeply unsettled. These beings didn't fight like any civilized species she'd ever encountered. Admiral Kane materialized on her bridge via transport beam, accompanied by 2 human officers. Lyra's first thought was that humans looked surprisingly similar to Zephyrians, despite evolving on different worlds. Her second thought was that there was something predatory in Kane's eyes that made her skin crawl. Captain Thane, Kane said, extending his hand in what she had learned was a human greeting gesture. I'm Admiral Kane, this is Commander Park and Colonel Mason. Lyra shook the offered hand, surprised by the strength of Kane's grip. Admiral, welcome to our system, though I must say your tactics are unusual. Kane smiled, and Lyra decided she preferred it when he wasn't smiling. Captain, show me your tactical displays. I want to see how you've been fighting these things. Lyra activated the holographic battlefield display, showing the positions of the remaining Devourer forces and the desperate defensive formations the Zephyrians had been using. Kane studied the display for several minutes, occasionally asking questions about Zephyrian weapons and tactics. I see the problem, Kane finally said. You've been fighting a defensive war. You're trying to protect your civilians and minimize casualties. That's admirable, but it's not how you win against an enemy like this. What do you suggest? Lyra asked, though she wasn't sure she wanted to hear the answer. Kane activated his own tactical display, showing the current positions of the human fleet. We're going to teach the Devourers something they've never experienced before: fear. Commander Park, show Captain Thane the psychological warfare protocols. Commander Park activated a data pad and began explaining human tactics that made Lyra's stomachs turn. The humans had analyzed Devourer biology and determined that their hive mind nature made them vulnerable to specific types of trauma. They had developed weapons designed not just to kill but to cause maximum psychological damage to the shared consciousness. You're going to torture them? Lyra asked, horrified. Captain, Kane said calmly, these creatures have consumed billions of your people. They've destroyed your civilization for no reason other than hunger. They won't negotiate, they won't surrender, and they won't stop until every living thing in this galaxy is dead. So yes, we're going to hurt them. We're going to hurt them so badly that they'll be afraid to ever leave their home territory again. Before Lyra could respond, alarms began sounding throughout her ship. Captain, massive Devourer force approaching from the outer system, Lieutenant Kess reported. It's their main battle fleet. Kane activated his communication device. All ships, this is Admiral Kane. Devourer main force is approaching. Execute Operation Nightmare. Show them what humans do to species that threaten Earth. What followed was unlike any battle in recorded galactic history. The Zephyrians had fought the Devourers with honor, using traditional fleet tactics and trying to minimize damage to both sides. The humans fought like something from the deepest nightmares of civilized space. Human ships didn't form neat battle lines. They attacked in coordinated wolf packs, using their smaller size and superior speed to dart in and out of the Devourer formations. But it wasn't just their tactics that were terrifying. It was their weapons. The ship Nightmare began broadcasting signals that interfered with the Devourer hive mind communications. The biological ships began experiencing coordination failures as their shared consciousness was disrupted by human psychological warfare broadcasts. My God, Lyra whispered as she watched the display. They're making the Devourers fight each other. Kane nodded approvingly. The hive mind is their strength, but it's also their weakness. Disrupt their communications and they become just individual animals fighting for survival. The ship Terror launched boarding pods directly into the largest Devourer bioships. But these weren't rescue missions or sabotage operations. The human boarding parties were armed with weapons specifically designed to cause trauma to biological entities. They broadcast the sounds of dying Devourers throughout the hive mind network, ensuring that every individual felt the fear and pain of their fellows. This is monstrous, Lyra said, watching as human soldiers systematically worked their way through a Devourer ship. Captain, Kane said quietly, your people tried to fight them with honor. How did that work out? My species learned long ago that when you're fighting for survival, honor is a luxury you can't afford. The tide of battle turned decisively when the humans deployed their most terrifying weapon, the ship Destroyer. The massive vessel rammed directly into the center of the Devourer formation, its reinforced hull tearing through biological ships like they were made of paper. But the Destroyer wasn't just a battering ram. As it carved its way through the enemy fleet, it deployed thousands of smaller weapons, kinetic kill vehicles that sought out individual Devourer ships and detonated with the force of nuclear weapons. Admiral, Lyra said, your ship is going to be destroyed. Kane's smile returned. Captain, that ship is crewed entirely by volunteers. They know they're not coming back. But every Devourer they kill is one that won't threaten Earth or any other world. The Destroyer exploded in a ball of fire that lit up the entire star system, but its sacrifice had broken the back of the Devourer fleet. The remaining bioships, their coordination shattered and their hive mind traumatized by the psychological warfare, began to retreat. All ships, pursue and destroy, Kane ordered. No prisoners, no quarter, no mercy. The human fleet chased the fleeing devourers across the system, hunting down individual ships with the efficiency that chilled Lyra to her core. These weren't soldiers, they were predators, and they had found their prey. When the last devourer ship was destroyed, Kane turned to Lyra. "Captain, where is their staging area?" "Where did they come from?" Lyra hesitated. "Admiral, surely now that the immediate threat is over." "Captain," Kane interrupted, "we didn't come here to save your system. We came here to make sure the devourers never threaten anyone again." "Where are they staging from?" Lyra looked at the tactical display showing the locations of devourer supply bases and rally points. She realized that the humans weren't going to stop with defending Zephyrian space. They were going to hunt the devourers to extinction. "Admiral," she said quietly, "what kind of species are you?" Kane looked out at the debris field that had once been an unstoppable invasion fleet. "Captain, we're the kind of species that doesn't let monsters live to threaten innocents. Your people called for help and now you're under our protection. That means anyone who threatens you has to go through us first." As the human fleet began preparations for their next offensive, Lyra realized that her people's plea for help had brought something to the galaxy that might be more dangerous than the devourers themselves. Earth had sent monsters to fight monsters, and the monsters from Earth had won. 3 months had passed since the human fleet arrived in Zephyrian space, and the galaxy would never be the same. Admiral Kane stood on the bridge of his flagship, studying tactical reports from across a 100-light-year radius. The devourer threat had been eliminated, but the implications of humanity's entry into galactic politics were only beginning to be understood. "Admiral, we've received responses to our diplomatic messages," reported Commander Park. "The Ethereal Dominion, Crystalline Hegemony, and Galactic Trade Federation are all requesting immediate meetings with Earth representatives." Kane smiled with satisfaction. The same civilizations that had ignored the Zephyrians' desperate pleas for help were now very interested in establishing relations with humanity. Fear, it seemed, was an excellent motivator for diplomacy. "What about the devourers?" Kane asked. Colonel Mason activated a holographic display showing the current status of what had once been devourer territory. "Sir, our pursuit fleets have eliminated every devourer outpost within the target zone. The few surviving ships have retreated deep into the galactic core and appear to be broadcasting warnings to stay away from human space." Kane nodded approvingly. The human campaign against the devourers had been swift and brutal. Unlike the Zephyrians who had fought defensively, the humans had taken the war directly to the enemy. They had tracked fleeing devourer ships back to their bases and systematically destroyed every installation they found. "Any word from the survivors?" Kane asked. "Yes, sir. Our intelligence teams intercepted several transmissions. The devourers are calling humans the death species and have marked our entire region of space as forbidden territory. It appears we've successfully traumatized their entire civilization." Captain Lyra Thane materialized on the bridge via communication array. Over the past months, she had served as the primary liaison between the Zephyrian government and the human fleet. The experience had changed her in ways she was still trying to understand. "Admiral Kane," she said, "I have a message from the Zephyrian Senate. They're prepared to offer Earth anything we desire as payment for your assistance. Technology, resources, territory. Name your price." Kane was quiet for a moment, considering the offer. The Zephyrians possessed technology that was centuries ahead of Earth's in many areas. Their scientific knowledge could accelerate human development by thousands of years. But Kane's response surprised everyone, including his own officers. "Captain Thane, tell your Senate that Earth requires only one thing: the coordinates of any other species or civilization that might threaten the Zephyrians in the future. You called for help and we answered. That makes you our responsibility now." Thane stared at Kane with amazement. "Admiral, you're refusing payment? Your species traveled hundreds of light years and lost ships and crews to save us, and you want nothing in return?" "Captain," Kane said firmly, "we didn't come here for profit. We came here because the right thing to do was to help. The Zephyrians are under Earth's protection now. Anyone who threatens you threatens us." The implications of Kane's words spread quickly throughout the galaxy. Humanity had established itself not as conquerors or exploiters, but as protectors. Other species began to reconsider their assumptions about the newcomers from the Sol system. Dr. Elena Vasquez, now serving as Earth's first interstellar diplomat, had arrived on the latest supply convoy from Earth. Her job was to establish formal relations with the galactic community, But she was discovering that humanity's reputation had preceded her. "Admiral," Dr. Vasquez reported, "I've been in contact with representatives from 17 different civilizations. They all want to know the same thing. What are humanity's territorial ambitions?" "Tell them the truth," Kane replied. "We have no interest in conquest. We're interested in making sure that what happened to the Zephyrians never happens to anyone else." "Sir, some of them are having trouble believing that. The crystalline hegemony specifically asked how we could afford to maintain military forces without expecting economic return." Kane activated the fleet communication system, addressing all ships simultaneously. "All vessels, this is Admiral Kane. Prepare for departure." "We're returning to Earth, Admiral?" Commander Park asked with surprise. "What about maintaining a garrison force?" "Commander, we're not occupying Zephyrian space. We're protecting it. There's a difference." Kane turned to Captain Thane's holographic image. "Captain, we're leaving a small diplomatic mission and an early warning network. If anyone threatens your people, we'll know about it." As the human fleet prepared for departure, Kane received a priority message from Earth. President Santos appeared on his private communication screen, looking both proud and concerned. "Admiral Kane, congratulations on your success. However, we're receiving some unusual diplomatic communications here on Earth. It seems your actions have attracted attention from civilizations we've never heard of." Kane nodded. "Ma'am, we've become a galactic power whether we wanted to or not. The question is what we do with that responsibility. Admiral, the Ethereal Dominion has sent a formal request for a defense pact. They're offering us access to their energy manipulation technology in exchange for a promise that we'll defend them against any future threats." Kane considered this carefully. The Dominion had refused to help the Zephyrians when they were dying, but now they wanted Earth's protection. It was exactly the kind of situation that required careful thought. "Ma'am, I recommend we accept their offer, but with conditions. We'll protect them, but they have to commit to helping other species in need. The galaxy can't depend on Earth to solve every problem." Over the following weeks, as the human fleet made its way back to Earth, similar requests arrived from dozens of other civilizations. The crystalline hegemony offered trade agreements. The Galactic Trade Federation proposed membership with unprecedented benefits. Even the warlike Saurian Empire sent ambassadors requesting military cooperation agreements. Captain Thane sent a final message to Admiral Kane as the human fleet departed Zephyrian space. "Admiral, on behalf of all Zephyrians, I want to thank you for saving our civilization. But I have to ask, why did Earth help us when no one else would?" Kane's response was transmitted throughout the galaxy, recorded and studied by xenosociologists on 100 different worlds. "Captain Thane, there's an old human saying, the only thing necessary for evil to triumph is for good people to do nothing. The Devourers were evil. Your people were innocent. The choice was simple. 6 months after the human fleet's return to Earth, the first Galactic Protection Summit was held in Earth orbit. Representatives from over 50 civilizations gathered to establish new protocols for responding to existential threats. The summit's final declaration was simple, but revolutionary. Any civilization facing extinction will receive aid from all summit members. No species will be abandoned to face annihilation alone. Dr. Elena Vasquez, now Earth's Secretary of Galactic Affairs, stood before the assembled delegates and delivered humanity's commitment to the new order. The galaxy is vast and full of wonders, but it's also full of dangers. Humanity learned long ago that we're stronger when we work together than when we stand alone. We extend that philosophy to all our galactic neighbors. The Ethereal Dominion representative, a being of pure energy called Radiance, pulsed with approval. The humans have shown us that strength without compassion is meaningless, but compassion without strength is helpless. Together, we can ensure that no civilization faces the fate that nearly befell the Zephyrians. As the summit concluded and the delegates returned to their home worlds, humanity found itself in a position it had never expected: the guardians of galactic civilization. It was a responsibility they hadn't sought, but one they accepted willingly. Captain Lyra Thane, now serving as Zephyrian ambassador to Earth, stood in the observation deck of the orbital station and watched the stars. Somewhere out there, the Devourers lurked in the darkness, afraid to venture into the light, and somewhere else, Earth's protection fleets patrolled the space lanes, ensuring that no innocent civilization would face extinction alone. She had asked the galaxy for help, and the galaxy had been silent. But Earth had sent monsters, the right kind of monsters. The kind that protected the innocent and made the wicked afraid to show their faces. The galaxy was a safer place now, watched over by the species that had learned the hard way that sometimes the greatest act of mercy was the willingness to fight impossible odds to protect those who couldn't protect themselves.